Yes, it's another fine day on Connect Your Audio. I am your host, David Gregors, along with you for the next hour or so. No biggie. Stunning and Brave, where are we at today? We're going to keep it down to about 100, maybe 101%. We've had a couple of heavy episodes in the last couple days, and it's never fun to accept the truths that we don't want to accept. Is never fun. It always takes a little bit more bravery to accept reality in the way that it actually is, or at least reality in a different way other than what we're normally looking at it. And so I commend you. Yesterday's episode was heavy, and it was also the highest rated one we've had. So I commend you for that, for at least being open, for at least beginning the process. Acceptance is the first step towards grief, is the first step in the grief process. And we need to begin accepting reality. So we're going to dial it back a little bit today. We're going to have some fun. Today in Culture is going to come back today, and we're just going to do it. But not before talking a little bit about the election, just a little bit, one segment. Yesterday, it came out that the state of Texas filed a lawsuit against the states of Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, all for the basis of it is that they are suing because the states certified their elections despite there having been rule changes that violated their own constitutions and their own statutes. I think that's up for debate as to whether or not they actually did. Pennsylvania for sure. I'm not sure about the other ones. It's a little hairy. But this is the basis of the lawsuit. Texas saying that its own electors and its own citizens have been disenfranchised by the certification of those other states. Now, this is interesting. This is an interesting argument from a legal standpoint, because I think the argument could be made that fraud, or not even fraud, but just illegalities in other states could disenfranchise the election in another state. And it's unique because it would be unique only to a federal election. Now, how would this, I think it would be useful to look at it on a smaller scale. So let's say you're in the state of Florida and you have, I don't know, let's say Jacksonville and St. Augustine, they're in neighboring counties. And so let's say if Jacksonville changed its election laws, stopped doing signature verification or something contrary to state law, and St. Augustine filed a lawsuit against the city and county of Jacksonville. It's also Duval County, stating that they've disenfranchised St. Augustine by changing their rules not in accordance with the state law. I think you can make that argument. I think that's an actual argument that you can make. But what I'm having difficulty accepting is that the remedy is to not allow those voters in Jacksonville to have any say whatsoever simply because the rule has changed. Because I don't think there's any way to know what rules what votes were specifically attributed to the rules changes. I don't know how you trace the damage back to any specific one action. In other words, how do you determine if you voted in Jacksonville and you voted legally versus your neighbor who did not vote or voted pursuant to a rule change? I mean, by the way, the person who votes pursuant to a rule change thinks they are following the rule. So do they deserve to have their votes disenfranchised? I'm not sure that you can make that argument, because what it boils down to is you have a city or a state, or in this case with Georgia, a state, making an illegal rule change, what is the remedy? I'm not sure that people who are voting pursuant to those rule changes deserve to have their votes thrown out. In other words, what Texas is talking about here is technical violations. All right, we're not talking about your grandpa who died in 1976 voting mysteriously. We're not talking about that. We're talking about, for instance, um, I don't even know. Maybe you didn't change your address or something, and for this election they decided to let that go, versus as long as you were in the same county, something like that. I'm not sure that the remedy is correct. In other words, I'm not sure that in the smaller example that St. Augustine would get to completely toss out Jacksonville's votes, and similarly, I'm not sure that Texas gets to throw out Georgia's votes. Now, this lawsuit has gotten a lot of traction or a lot of attention, I guess, because the Supreme Court agreed to hear it. It's a state directly going to the Supreme Court. They didn't go through any of these through any of these lower courts. They didn't go to the Federal Circuit Court. They didn't go to the appeals court. They went straight to the Supreme Court with this case. As far as I know, this is a novel case. I don't know that anybody has ever done it before. Certainly, if they have, it's never been successful. So it's going to be interesting. It's getting a lot of attention because a lot of other states are joining it. Louisiana, a bunch of red states, really. So people are really excited that all these states are joining in. I'm not as excited about that, mainly because it's very obviously a political suit at that point. Texas is clearly a red state. Maybe if they had gone by themselves, or maybe if they had taken on another red state, maybe they could have gotten some sort of precedent here. But I think the Supreme Court, yes, I'm glad we have 6 conservative justices, but guys, these justices, they don't work for Donald Trump. Okay? They don't work even really for us. The Supreme Court works for the Constitution. And so when you pose a question like, should a red state be able to overturn a blue state's votes, because it thinks that the processes weren't followed properly, or they think it violated the Constitution. Again, I think that the Supreme Court is going to be very suspicious of that. I think they're going to look at it from this is a political lawsuit sort of standpoint. And if you have 20 states that are all red joining in against these other states, it's going to be even more clear. These other blue states, they're just suing to change the result of the election. They're not suing. So, and here's what I'm getting at. We're assuming, because of this, that there are no red states that did not follow the law. And the problem with it is, I can't prove that to be the truth. I think if we dug deeply enough, I think that we could find a red state that did something similar than Georgia. Because, by the way, Georgia is a red state. It has a Republican governor, it has a Republican legislature, it has a Republican lieutenant governor, and a Republican secretary of state. Georgia is, by all measures, a red state that happened to go blue. So it's a little bit disingenuous to say that Georgia is a blue state. Georgia is technically a red state, so that even makes it even more likely that any sort of rule changes like that or whatever is going to be viewed suspiciously by other red states. And so I just have to believe that the Supreme Court is going to see this as a political lawsuit, a partisan lawsuit. Maybe if you have a blue state join into this lawsuit, because what we're talking about is not disenfranchisement. Really and truly it's not, because Texas wouldn't say boo had Donald Trump eked out a victory in Georgia. They wouldn't. They would not be suing Georgia right now if not for the fact that Joe Biden won it. So I don't think this one has a lot of legs. It's interesting. I think we should keep an eye on it. But I think there is exactly zero chance that the Supreme Court is going to overturn the election results in any state, much less the state of Georgia. I thought Pennsylvania was the best option. Last night, the Supreme Court 9-0 ruled against an emergency injunction attempting to keep or to undo the certification of the election in Pennsylvania. 9-0. The Supreme Court said, nope, we're not going to do that. We'll still maybe hear the case. It's a little unclear, but they weren't going to stop the certification. And yesterday, I believe, was the safe harbor date. That is the date that Congress set forth that the elections in all the states should be certified. The court challenges should be done. Of course, the safe harbor. I think all the states now have certified, and the safe harbor has been met. However, considering there's pending litigation, there's still a possibility the Supreme Court could overturn some of that, force them to decertify. What Giuliani and Jenna Ellis are trying to do is have the Supreme Court make a ruling that says these legislatures can go and name their own electors. It appears the legislatures think that they can't, some of them. And what this all boils down to is what I talked about either yesterday or the day before, which is that there's not going to be any legislator in any of these states who wants to be put in the situation of having to go against Donald Trump. In other words, be put in a place where they're having to choose between Donald Trump and the voters of the state. There's just not going to be, I think, many legislators who are going to want to do that. So I understand that they're probably hiding. I think they do have the ability to go and name their own electors. It makes sense in the checks and balances system. I think the Secretary of State and the governor certifying the election, to me, it makes sense that there would be a check. In other words, the legislature could come and say no and override it. But I don't know. We're not in a good place with the elections. All right, we're just not. I had a long discussion with my wife yesterday morning about this, and she's like, "Why?" Because I posed the question as I did before. What do you think? Did you think on November 1st that there was a real possibility that Joe Biden could win the election without fraud? This is what we talked about yesterday. And she got very upset. Saying, "Why are you making these pro-Biden statements?" And I said, "Well, I'm not. It's not a pro-Biden statement. It's a statement of the reality of the fact that on November 1st, we didn't know who was going to win the election. We had the polls that we don't trust. We had a really, really terrible situation in the country where we've had riots. We've had a pandemic that's had us shut down. We've had a president who was impeached. Really, really tough situation for the country. But also a lot of good things that would seem to lead another way. We had Trump showing up at rallies with 20, 30,000 people. You had Biden showing up and he barely had anyone there. We were told that was a big deal, but the more I'm looking back at it, the more I'm thinking this was a sales pitch by Trump, right? I mean, the more I'm looking back at it, I think Trump wanted these big rallies because, number one, he does better in that situation. He does better feeding off the crowd energy. He wanted that picture of the 30,000 people there versus Joe Biden, who was openly enforcing coronavirus recommendations by making the stupid little circles and all of that. Do I think Joe Biden could have pulled 30,000 people in a rally? No, but he had a really good strategic reason to not have a whole bunch of people at a rally, that being the coronavirus, because I don't think there was really any enthusiasm for Joe Biden. I think there was a lot of enthusiasm against Donald Trump, but I don't think there was any for Joe Biden. So I think he could have gotten more than 6 people at his rally. for sure. I mean, I really do. But everyone, I think that punch kind of fell short when I think people understood that Biden was doing the circles for the social distancing and all that. And even if you thought that was a bit over the top, I think most people in the real world, again, meeting people where they are, I think most people in the middle thought that was just it was just a good idea. It was just a good thing to do to keep the social distancing. Where do I stand on it? I wouldn't go to a crowd like that. I don't want to get sick. I don't know why it seems like so many people on our side do, but I think the idea is that eventually everyone's going to get the coronavirus and all that, so we might as well get it over with. I don't want to be sick. I don't like being sick. I don't like being put down for any length of time, so I would not go to and I didn't. I didn't go to any rallies for Trump. Plenty of people did. He wasn't missing me, so that's fine. So, before I get too off on a tangent there, I do want to talk about there is a an interesting breakdown just talking about Georgia. So Trump is giving Georgia just absolute hell right now. He's giving Georgia hell because of Brian Kemp, and Trump thinks that Kemp should call the legislature into session so that they can overturn the election results or decertify it and try to appoint their own electors. Yada yada yada. We know, we get it. This is a problem with Trump, and it's ugly. He should not be attacking. This is Reagan's 11th commandment, right? Speak no ill of fellow Republicans. This is what he's doing, and I don't like it because I don't think you should be. Yes, you can criticize whatever, and yes, he's a New York businessman, and he's a little bit rougher around the edges, and that's fine. But we don't do things like that in Georgia. But let's just talk about the Georgia. So the Washington Post had an interesting little breakdown of the regions in Georgia and the votes, how they compared to 2016. And the reason I say this is interesting is because I'm from Georgia. I know Georgia very, very well. I love Georgia, and so I have noticed most of my experience in Georgia is in the two regions called South Georgia. The Washington Post calls South Georgia, which reaches from the southwest corner, which would be Seminole County, and crosses all the way across the bottom of the state, all the way to Camden County on the coast. It stretches up towards Savannah, but there's a cutout just a little bit above that of what they call the Black Belt, which runs from the South Carolina border. I can't really tell if that includes Macon, Georgia or not. I would think it would, but the Black Belt comes down, again, back down to above Seminole County, which is Miller County, Blakely, Early County, Mitchell, Baker counties, Doherty, Lee. That's my area. That's where I'm from, and so I'm a mixture of being in the Black Belt and South Georgia, and so it breaks down these areas. And what I noticed, I was actually in Georgia on election day, in the couple of days prior to that, and I was in this Black Belt area, and a little bit of the South Georgia area. I would actually include these Seminole, Decatur, what county is that? Grady. Yeah, I would include these within the Black Belt. I think these have more in common with the Black Belt, so-called counties, than they do with Valdosta and all those other counties. But, it's neither here nor there. Black Belt. So that's where I was, and it does include Columbus. So, and Macon. So Bibb County is on there too. So the Black Belt. This is where I was, and I really haven't gotten out of the house a whole lot. I mean, I haven't been completely a shut-in all year, but I definitely have gone fewer places, as I think most people have. And I have noticed where I live in Florida, there were a lot of Trump signs. There always were. Back to the beginning. But for the most part, during the summer, I didn't really see a whole lot for Biden. And so when we were getting ready to go to Georgia right before the election, we were leaving, and I happened to see a group of Democrats in my town who were rallying for Biden. And of course, you know, we didn't honk at them or wave at them or anything like that. We just pretended we didn't see them. But that was really the first bit of enthusiasm I saw for Biden. Now, I live in a very, very Republican county in the state of Florida, so that's not very surprising that I didn't see a whole lot. But I also didn't see my neighborhood filled with Trump signs, right? The enthusiasm was a little bit lower for Trump, it seemed to me, this time around, despite his being a fairly successful president. Now, contrast that with we were in Florida. We headed up to Georgia in the Black Belt, so southwest Georgia, which was where we went. And I lived in that area my whole life up until 2013. Okay, I lived in this Black Belt region from the time I was born all the way up until 2013, with the small exception of some time I spent in Valdosta going to undergrad. But my home was still in this Black Belt region. So I'm very familiar with the election, how things are perceived around there, how enthusiasm works and all of that. And I know that yard signs and bumper stickers don't vote, but I was struck by the fact that we were driving around in this area. We were off. We weren't in cities or anything. We were off in the country because we enjoy country driving and trying to find, dirt roads and all that, because we don't really get to do that around here. So we take the 4-wheel drive out to the dirt roads and all that. And but I was struck by the fact that these signs that I was seeing for Trump and the signs that I was seeing for Biden, it was about 50-50. This was far more enthusiasm in this area than I had ever seen for a Democrat going back to the 80s. I have never seen a Democrat get that much enthusiasm. And it was jarring. I mean, now if I had broken down the count between the Trump signs and the Biden signs and the Trump bumper stickers and the Biden bumper stickers, I think it would have come out to about 51-49. 51-49 for Trump. I may be wrong. I mean, it was close enough that there may have been more Biden signs. And this was shocking. This was shocking for this area. Because typically, and I think the reason that they've broken these counties down this way is because there are some blue counties in here, some consistently blue counties in here, but I was in consistently red counties. Okay? So I was a little bit shocked. So the Washington Post delivers the vote totals here. Compared to 2016. Compared to 2016, Hillary Clinton won this area, this Black Belt area, 194, Hillary Clinton had 235,000 votes to 194,353 for Trump. In 2020, Trump increased his vote share in this area by about 22,000 votes. But Joe Biden increased his vote share over Hillary Clinton in 2016 by about 45,000 votes. All right? So in real numbers, in terms of actual percentages, this means that in 2016, Hillary Clinton won the Black Belt region 54.7% to Trump's 45.2%. In 2020, Joe Biden won 56.1% to Trump's 43.9%. Now, why am I talking about this? This is important. This is an area where you're going to have, if there is a surge in Democrat interest, it's going to be in this area. And we're also not in an area where there's any widespread allegations of voting abnormalities. I mean, there's, of course, for the whole state, it's like the whole state is spoiled with the signature verification and all this stuff. But we don't have the situation like they had in Fulton County where you have some questionable things happening, and we have a 2% increase for Joe Biden over Hillary Clinton, 45,000 votes better. The election for 2020, the margin was something like 10,000 for Joe Biden. So when somebody says Joe Biden couldn't possibly have won Georgia, I mean, look at this one little area here, the Black Belt, where you have a 45,000 vote increase. Trump lost 2% of the vote, and Biden gained 2% of the vote. That's enough. That's more than enough. But we can compare it to the Piedmont region, where Trump actually gained a little bit. He gained about 83,000 votes, whereas Joe Biden lost about 68,000. Not enough, probably, to make up for the differences in the Black Belt. South Georgia, the other region I'm aware of, Trump gains about, 70,000 votes. And Biden also gains about, 52,000 votes. So both gained here. I guess this was probably a turnout issue. A little bit better turnout in the South Georgia region. And let's talk about North Georgia. The Atlanta area is where all the problems are. So we're talking about Fulton County here. And you have Joe Biden outperforming Hillary Clinton by about 140,000 votes, roughly. My math may be a little bit off there. I'm not a math major. You have the Atlanta suburbs where Trump picked up a little bit over 2016. Not a whole heck of a lot, though, 38,000 votes versus Joe Biden, this is really stunning. And this may be where the problem lies mostly. You have a spike in Joe Biden from 452,000 in 2016 to 640,000 in 2020. And again, Atlanta, the region is problematic, but this does not include Fulton County, where most of the focus of the attention for the vote spikes is right now. We don't have that kind of attention being focused on the Atlanta suburbs. And the Atlanta suburbs came out big time for Joe Biden. Talk about North Georgia, the mountain region. Trump had a big increase there. Biden had a big increase there, but turnout overall was up higher. Trump beat his 2016 totals by about 230,000 votes, 130,000 votes. But Joe Biden beat Hillary Clinton by about 80,000, maybe 90. So it's what's the bottom line here? Take Atlanta out, and you still have a close race. You still have a much closer race than you had in 2016. So, yes, you need Fulton County in there to get Joe Biden over the line, but what I'm suggesting is that Trump actually didn't do as well in Georgia as people think he did. Now, if you want to toss out the whole state saying the whole thing is spoiled because of all this and all that, then that's fine. Toss it out. Don't even pay attention to it. But I'm telling you what I saw on the ground. You can tell me about your rallies. Okay? You can tell me about the rallies. You can tell me about the 6 people at the Biden rally. I'm telling you what I saw the day of the election in South Georgia. In the Black Belt, in Doherty, Lee, Sumter, those counties. And this mattered. This is why I was not terribly surprised that Georgia turned blue. And there's another issue that I think is going to be important going forward. We keep hearing about the dead people voting, but it looks like the only actual proof of any dead people voting is coming courtesy of these people who were alive during the early voting period and who sent in ballots, and since between that date and the election date they actually died. um, we're not hearing. I mean, there are some anecdotal stories of people voting from who died in the 70s or something. Those are bad, but there is a question. If you follow all the rules and voting is available to you on, say, October 20th, and you fill out a ballot and it's duly certified and signed and all this sort of things, and you turn it in and it meets all the qualifications, and you happen to die on October 22nd, does your vote still count? Should it? Well, I know you're saying no out there, but why not? Why not? If you're alive, you're following the rules, you're doing everything you can, and as of the day that you voted, you meet all the criterion. Why would you not? Why would your vote not count? I think there's an argument to be made for that, but I think you're also going to be put in a situation where when you're counting votes, it's impossible to tell who was alive and who was dead. In other words, we operate on a secret ballot. That's what's making this so difficult, right? Because once your ballot goes in and they verify, a perfect example of how they do this is how we do it in Florida, okay? If you do an absentee ballot, you get your ballot in the mail. It comes with your inner envelope that you put your ballot in, and then it comes with an outer envelope that you put the ballot in the inner envelope inside. And so on the outer envelope, that's where you sign that it's you, and you date it, and you all this stuff, and you put it in the mailbox and all that. And it comes to them in the mail. They open it, they check your signature. If it looks good, they then open the ballot, take the inner ballot out, and the two things are separated. At some point, they run what you actually vote on, your actual ballot. They run that through the machine, and it is separated. They do not know who you vote for. That's a right in our Constitution that we have a secret ballot in this country. So when you're talking about a dead person who's voted early, how do you recommend that we remedy that? Should we do a sign of life check, I guess, for all the early and absentee voting? Maybe. But is it right to say that someone who votes, if voting is available on October 20th, and they are alive and they follow the rules and their signatures match and they vote on October 20th, is it right for them to be disenfranchised if they die before Election Day? I mean, I could go either way, but it becomes a remedy that's difficult. I think that we may just need to get rid of the early voting, but the absentee ballots, you're still going to have that problem. And again, who's going to check and make sure the absentee ballots are still alive? If you want to fix it so that you have to be alive on Election Day, then, and it could just be that absentee ballots and mail-in ballots are just the problem, and we should just always have in-person day of voting, which is going to suppress a lot of people from voting. I just telling you. I mean, it just is. So, one last point on this, and it's actually from George Conway. This is at Breitbart. He makes I think George Conway is a terrible human being. I don't know how he's married to Kellyanne Conway. I don't hold that against her. People love who they love. But George Conway got turned down for a spot in the administration, and ever since then he has just been all against Donald Trump. But he makes a good point on Jake Tapper's show, whatever they call it, The Lead, right? So he talks about how you're not going to overturn, and I actually agree with him. He says that all of this, the cake is baked, and it has been for a long time, and that's correct. At the point of the certification of these votes, the fraud and everything that you want to allege is baked in. It's baked in. I mean, it just is. And by the way, the Constitution, as I noted, has a remedy for this, and that is another election 4 years from now. That is elections for the state officials 2 years from now. You don't like Kemp? Let's do a primary. Let's get rid of him. But I maintain my position that it's too late. It's too late. There's no way to unring the bell. Ann Coulter has made the point that Trump was talking about all of this stuff, this ballot problems with the mail-in voting and all of that, and he really never did much of anything to address it beforehand. How much could he have done? I don't know, but I get the point. I mean, it's at some point, it's like, stop complaining about things that are happening and actually do something, because it sounded like he was making excuses. If you're on the other side and we're meeting them where they're at, and we're listening to Trump talk about how he's only going to lose if it's rigged, and then he's whining about mail-in ballots and all of that, it's difficult to understand the argument that he's making, and it's because it's not his style. He's not a lawyer. He's not any of the things that you really need to be able to make a convincing argument about really difficult details, like the conversation we've just had about dead people voting. If they're alive on the day they vote and their vote is counted after they die, does that matter? That's a really high level conversation to have about election reform and election processes. Trump isn't really capable of having those conversations on any sort of legal basis. He is absolutely capable of doing it in terms of trade. In fact, some of his best moments in the debates in 2016 were talking about trade. That's why nobody talked about trade in either of the two debates that we had before. I mean, he killed it on that, and of course, they wanted to stay as far off that topic as they could. So, Trump had some time to do something about this, whatever he could do. He had a Republican Senate. He had the bully pulpit, and he, for whatever reason, maybe he was focused on coronavirus, whatever, it didn't happen. I'm not blaming him for the fraud, but what I am saying is that when you're the president of the United States and you see that a problem is coming, you're going to have to do more than talk about it at rallies. I mean, that's just, if he learns anything, I hope it's that there does need to be some sort of action, okay? Because there's a real problem in the Trump administration. I have to turn the stunning and brave up just a little bit because I know a lot of you aren't ready to hear it, but there's a real problem in the Trump administration, and that is when you go to rallies and you are saying, lock her up, when you are saying all of these people commit crimes against you and against this country, and yet they never get arrested. Justice is never served upon these people. You talk about mail-in ballots for a year and how you're going to get the election stolen from you and you don't do anything about it. It's a problem. That's a problem. That's a credibility gap. And I do believe Trump has kept a lot of his promises, but he's also talked out of his you-know-what a lot. Can we be honest about that? He's talked out of his rear end a lot. And those sorts of things, that's the red meat that people are still talking about, like on Twitter. Like, oh man, I can't wait until these two Georgia senators and Governor Kemp from Georgia and Hillary and all these, Bill Barr and Jeff Sessions for some odd reason. I can't wait until all these people are at Gitmo. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Why? Why would they be there? And then I realize you have a president who's been saying lock them up and all of this stuff. And if you're going to say that these people are doing these things, it's reasonable to expect that there would be some sort of a consequence down the road. And if there's not going to be any consequence, I wish he would just say, look, this is not a banana republic. We don't arrest our political enemies. But at some point, we have to look at the man himself and say, you've got to stop talking out your rear end. as we would say in South Georgia, in the Black Belt in Georgia. You got to stop doing it because it's giving people unrealistic expectations. Okay, so big news came out yesterday. Want to move on from the election because it's really, ugh, it's depressing. Um, Big news yesterday. The most how should I say, embarrassing member of Congress currently. I think that this is, there's really no contest. Eric Swalwell is the really nerdy kid who decides that he really wants to be in with the cool people, and so he starts hanging out with them and dressing like they do, and they just mostly ignore him, but he's just sort of adjacent to the cool people, and he's trying to draft off of the cool people, as we would say in racing. You're drafting, right? He's trying to increase his street cred by drafting off of the actual street cred of the cool people. And this is Eric Swalwell. Eric Swalwell is an empty suit, if there ever was one in Washington. He is an embarrassment. He is a guy who thinks that it's just funny to flatulate on TV. Like, this is a person who is just embarrassing. If he ever, as it turns out, he actually ran for president, and his campaign was one big meme. If you don't remember, it's because he is so meaningless and so useless that nobody really paid attention. But if you're a political junkie, you know what I'm talking about. There was all this talk about changing diapers, and he was an embarrassment. He was out well before anybody cast any votes. He may have even been out before Kamala Harris, who didn't get any votes. But the difference between Swalwell and Harris is nobody expected Swalwell to get any votes. So, nevertheless, it came out yesterday that there was a Chinese little honeypot spy doing a honeypot thing. And her name is Fang Fang. I believe the Chinese pronounce it Feng Feng. But her Americanized name was Christine Fang or Feng. I'm just going to say Fang because I don't know and I'm not Chinese. So, as it turns out, Christine Fang has been quite a busy little lady in the United States going back to 2014 at least. She's been sleeping with various mayors all over the country, and it appears was sleeping with Eric Swalwell. God only knows why. I mean, so if she's a spy, yes, he is on the House Intelligence Committee, but I mean, what is I don't know, John Thune not available or some? Why are you picking Eric Swalwell of all the people? Like this, and a bunch of Midwestern mayors with nothing in their towns. What are you doing exactly? I mean, spycraft is what it is, I guess, and it's an interesting thing, and I guess maybe you don't want to always go after the most obvious targets, but nevertheless, she drew the attention of the FBI, and they started surveilling her, and they found out that she was, no one's saying the words yet, but she was definitely in the orbit of Eric Swalwell. Fang reportedly took part in fundraising for Swalwell, according to Fox News, for his 2014 re-election campaign. She did not make any donations herself, supposedly, and there's no evidence of any illegal contributions. So lots and lots of really, really fun stuff going on with her. As it turns out, she was actually did something sort of similar to this with Tulsi Gabbard and I can't remember his name, the other congressman from Ro Khanna, I believe his name is. So she's been a player in California for sure. And she also targeted, I think she targeted Tulsi Gabbard because she was targeting Indian Congress people and Indian politicians. It's really interesting. So we don't really even know what she was doing or what sort of information she was getting. But that's even not really the funny part of the story. What the funny part of the story is that Swalwell, this came out in a report from Axios. And it was big news because he is on the House Intelligence Committee. But the funny part is that he's blaming Donald Trump for this for some reason, and his quote is because of the timing. I've been I've been a critic against the president. I've spoken out against him. I was on both committees that worked to impeach him. The timing feels like that should be looked at. Okay, what are you talking about? All right, you're Eric Swalwell. You're a fly on the wall. Nobody cares that you were on any committees. Literally, nobody cares. You are barely relevant. Nobody knows how you even got into Congress. I think you're just hanging out there. I mean, has anyone checked any election results to make sure he's actually in Congress and he's not just doing a George Costanza and just going in and hanging out and pretending to work there? Or I guess that would be Kramer. Costanza didn't want to get fired, but it's sort of a play on the theme, right? So Kramer goes and starts pretending to work someplace. I think that's what's happening with Swalwell. Someone should check on him. Because I can't believe I live in a country where some goofball, some little incompetent person like Eric Swalwell could be put into Congress. Like, I mean, I know we have a number of incompetent people, but I literally see no reason for him to be there. I can actually understand AOC, why she's there. She played a very smart move running in a Democrat district where like 5 people voted, and she just happened to get three of the votes, and the other guy got 2 she was just being an ideologue, and ideologues really do get a lot of support just by the pure thrust of their strength and passion of their positions, and it's understandable that someone like AOC is there. Eric Swalwell, I'm not really sure he's not likable. He doesn't strike me as someone who should be entrusted with the nation's secrets, as it seems to be he fell for a honeypot scheme here. I hope his wife is taking note and not letting him, or maybe making him change the diapers of the kid today. I don't care how old the kid is. He should be on that duty. I think he should get much worse than that. But the point of it is, the Chinese, this is the second one that I know of where a Chinese spy has gotten very close. Very, very close to someone who is in a serious position of power. Dianne Feinstein was the other one. There was a Chinese spy who worked as Feinstein's driver for, 10, 20 years. We're not finding this with the Republicans. This is the Democrats we're talking about. So what's going on? What's going on with the Democrats? I think it's worth asking that question. And that's really all I have on that. I don't think there's much more to the story just yet. It just seems like it's something that's just now breaking, and I'll follow it. And I'll let you know as more stuff comes out. All right, today in culture, the return of this very popular segment. Today in culture, we're going to talk about aliens. That's fun, right? I mean, it's not heavy. I needed like 110% for the first segment of the Stunning and Brave. I needed a little less for the last segment. This one I can coast through, because who doesn't like to talk about aliens? It's not something people get heated about. But we have an article out of Breitbart today that says a retired Israeli general is telling people that space aliens asked Trump not to expose the Galactic Federation. This is really exciting stuff. A retired Israeli general. His name is Professor. Let me back up. He's a retired general in Israel, and apparently was a space security chief, and his name is Professor Chaim Eshed. I know I'm killing that, but I tried. Chaim. I don't really have that Yiddish thing. He said during an interview with the Israeli newspaper Yediot Aharonot, my apologies, last week, that extraterrestrials have been in contact with the governments of the United States and Israel for years. I mean, this is huge. And he says that Trump was on the verge of revealing this secret before the Galactic Federation asked him to remain silent, as the aliens are worried that humanity is not ready to learn about their existence yet. This is huge, and he goes on to say that the UFOs have asked not to publish that they are here. Humanity is not ready. There's an agreement between the U.S. government and the aliens. They signed a contract with us to do experiments here. They too are researching and trying to understand the whole fabric of the universe, and they want us as helpers. There's an underground base in the depths of Mars where their representatives are, and also our American astronauts. This is great. I mean, and I don't mean to sound sarcastic, because I actually do believe in aliens. See, the thing about it is you can't have it both ways. You cannot believe, on the one hand, that there are an infinite number of stars in the universe. And each star, the stars that aren't planets or something else, each star is a sun in its own solar system. I mean, that's literally infinity. And you cannot say that you believe in that, and that it is impossible that life wasn't placed or evolved on another planet somewhere. You just can't. You just can't. You cannot hold those. Those two things are logically inconsistent. So I am fully of the belief that there are aliens out there, and I just got a news alert saying Trump is going to intervene in the Texas case. What does that mean? Just briefly, the Texas case is not a part of any Trump action. It's strictly a Texas and the joining states, the states that have joined that. This is a civil procedure move. Trump is actually going to intervene in that case to get standing in front of the Supreme Court to help with that. Back to the aliens, because this is much more fun. I think it's inconsistent to say that literally infinity exists, but we are the only people. We're the only intelligent life. Take that to another level and say multiverse theory, and there are multiple levels of existence, and literally, if you really want to get down into quantum mechanics and everything, the actual possibility that any time there are two choices for anything, a new reality is created. One in which you go left and one in which you go right. I mean, it's really, really deep. So you can't really get into any of that stuff. Really and truly, if you don't want to believe in aliens, you have to see things in the blue pill universe, right? You have to see things in the very narrow universe. But there's also the possibility that aliens are just a distraction. That aliens don't actually exist, and that they're actually some sort of national security sort of thing. But I maintain that it is impossible to believe in the full range of possibilities that we are presented every day in terms of the universe, in terms of multiverse and all that. I maintain that it's impossible to believe in those things without believing that there's intelligent life somewhere else. Now, this guy, this Chaim Eshed, Professor Chaim Eshed, this guy is actually a pretty. He's got some gravitas. He's got some weight behind him. And so for him to be saying this is what drew my attention, because anytime you have high level people saying this sort of thing, then I take note. And I think it's interesting that he says that Trump was on the verge of revealing, because there's been a couple of things in the Trump administration that have drawn my attention. The first being the Space Force. He was made fun of for doing the Space Force, but he is very proud of the Space Force, and I have always said, don't make fun of the Space Force, because you don't know what he knows. I don't know what his plan behind that is. I thought maybe China was potentially trying to weaponize in space, but maybe there's something else. Maybe it's both. Maybe both things are true. I don't know. But to me, Trump's focus on the Space Force is exactly in line also if you were to believe that there's aliens and you were to believe that he was putting in the Space Force for our security, our national security, that's actually kind of in line with his behavior against Russia, against China, against any adversary, Iran. He's if we're in an adversarial position with somebody, he has been very clear to draw a distinction and make sure that they know we're adversarial. He tries to work with them, but he cuts off this intermingling and makes sure that they know that we're not buddies, but we're gonna make sure that we are working for peace, but for our own interests. And so having the Space Force out there would actually be kind of in line with what Chaim Eshed is saying here. That we have this agreement with the aliens. And also, him being on the verge of revealing it, I can believe that too. Because he really hasn't given us a great explanation for Space Force. And also, with him losing the election, there's been a huge push on him from some on the right to go ahead and start releasing things. Release things about the spying on his campaign, release all this classified stuff, tell us who killed Kennedy finally, tell us about the aliens, tell us about Roswell, tell us about everything. Just go ahead and release it all. And I am fully in favor of that, okay? If there's not an immediate national security threat, in other words, there's no spy over in Iran that's going to be outed and killed, there's no secret missile locations or anything like that. If there's not a security threat, release it. Full disclosure, I don't believe the United States government should be anywhere near as secretive with the American people as it is. So aliens, come along. But I actually am a little bit concerned about the aliens. Not that I think they're hostile or anything like that, but if they're visiting, I kind of feel like my house is kind of dirty and somebody's come over and I wasn't really expecting them. I'm a little bit embarrassed by what's going on. Certainly in our country and in our world. I mean, we're not exactly together here. And I hope that my one little voice and my few little listeners will take note that we got to come together as if we have company. As if we have company coming over. We've got to come together. We've got to clean up our house a little bit. And I'm not talking about pollution or anything like that, although it would be nice to clean the oceans up and stuff like that. I'm talking about our attitudes and our behaviors, and maybe put down the TikTok and pick up a book, and put down the blue pill and pick up the red pill. And let's start looking at truth, and let's stop being quite so hateful to each other and start meeting each other where we are. So that is today in culture. I, as always, am so thankful for each and every one of my listeners. I could not be more. It's mind-boggling that anyone would actually tune in and listen to me, and to have as many people as I do who are doing that is it's amazing. I can't get my mind around it. So thank you. As always, if you like what you hear, please tell your friends, tell your neighbors, like, share, subscribe. If there's a bell to ring wherever you're listening to it, ring the bell. Not to get notifications, but just ring it out of happiness for all I care. It's great. We are on multiple podcast services. We are on iTunes. We are on Spotify. We are on Google Podcasts. We're on Amazon Music. We're on Acast, on TuneIn, on Pocket Cast, on Deezer, on Breaker, on Stitcher, on Donner, on Blitzen, on Cupid, on Comet. All of you. Thank you. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to tell your friends. As always, be safe, be well, and God bless.